So I don't think it's any secret that there are a lot of bad tropes out there. I could sit here all day and list ones I don't like or think are problematic in some way. But there is one trope in particular that I don't see talked about nearly as much as I think it should be, and that's the child-free turned parent trope. Before I go into examples of this and why it's a problem, I just want to pause and clarify a few terms so there's no confusion later on. First of all, a child-free person is someone who has made the deliberate choice never to become a parent. This is not the same thing as a childless person, which is someone who wants children but can't have them. A childless person could also be someone who has chosen not to have children because of a certain set of circumstances, but would want them if those circumstances were different. Think someone who is struggling financially and can't afford to raise children, but would make a different choice were they suddenly to come into a lot of money. We also have what we call fence sitters, which are the people who have not yet decided whether or not they'll have children. Neither one of these is the same as a child-free person. Child-free means the decision has been made. In case you hadn't already guessed, I fall into the child-free camp. I've known from about the age of 11 that I never wanted kids, and it's not something I've ever wavered on. Despite that, I have met absolutely no end of people who believe it's their place to tell me that I'm making the wrong choice or that I'll regret it someday, as though it's in any way, shape, or form their business. But where does this idea come from that children are not just a happy ending, but the ultimate happy ending? Well, once upon a time, people had to have big families to work the farm or inherit the land or whatnot, so some of this probably originated because they wanted to feel better about that prospect, but we've moved on since then. You don't have a royal bloodline to protect, okay? You work at Macy's. Have kids if you want to, but please don't kid yourself. Children are human beings, not a legacy. But anyway, back on track, I really think a big reason why so many child-free people aren't taken seriously is because the media we consume is still pushing this idea that being a parent is the end-all be-all of human existence. This is pretty consistent throughout all genres, but romance and rom-coms is where I see it the most. Think shows like Friends, The Nanny, New Girl, The Big Bang Theory, How I Met Your Mother, Parks and Recreation, or Brooklyn Nine-Nine. All of which either end on the arrival of a child, the main characters as parents, or with the expectation that they will be parents eventually. Now, just to be clear, I don't have a problem with characters having children if that actually fits their character. In Friends, for example, Monica had always wanted to be a mother, and as early as season 1, Chandler was suggesting that they get together and have kids someday. So the show ending with them finally becoming parents actually made sense. Contrast that against something like The Nanny. Yes, Fran had always shown an interest in having children, but Maxwell already had 3 of his own, and had to be talked into having more, even though he didn't really want to. But even them ending the show with having children made more sense than Niles and Cece, who are revealed to be expecting in the last episode. Cece had made it clear multiple times throughout the show that she doesn't like children, and Niles was already sick of taking care of other people. I guess the expectation is because it's her baby, Cece will feel differently and become a good mother once that maternal instinct kicks in. I'm sorry, but even in fiction, that's an incredibly naive stance to take. We would all love to believe that something magical happens at birth that makes a parent love their child no matter what, but that's simply not true. If it was, we would never have to worry about children being abandoned or mistreated. I had a similar reaction to Brooklyn Nine-Nine when the character of Gina became pregnant. Gina, who had been utterly disgusted by pregnancy and childbirth just a season before. And yes, I know this plotline was a result of the actress becoming pregnant in real life, but they had hidden pregnancies before, and for the character of Gina, this just didn't make any sense. I will at least give the show credit where it's due, though, because they at least recognized that becoming a mother wasn't enough of a happy ending for Gina, and they had her officially leave to start her thriving social media career, so at least there's a silver lining. But Brooklyn Nine-Nine has another black mark in the character of Jake, who expresses doubts about becoming a parent in season 6. Now, to be fair, he had mentioned having kids in the series before, so I think it's fair to label him as a fence-sitter rather than child-free, but this episode still really irked me because all of his perfectly valid concerns about parenthood are just swept right under the rug. I don't want to completely hate on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, though, because it did give us Rosa Diaz and Raymond Holt and Kevin Costner. none of whom are ever made explicitly child-free, but it is strongly implied. Although it is also worth noting that these are also the show's queer characters, and queer people as a whole are usually held to a different standard than straight people are, as far as settling down and raising a family goes. Because even though I think that most people nowadays understand that queer couples are just as capable of having children as straight couples, for a long time that wasn't the case due to prejudice and societal standards, and we're still shaking off the remnants of that era. I also believe that consciously or subconsciously, there's still this idea in our society that if you can't have your own biological children, there's no point in having children at all, which is a real slap in the face to anyone who's ever been adopted. But moving on, in a similar situation to Jake and Amy from 9/9, we also have April and Andy from Parks and Recreation. Andy wants to have children while April isn't sure, but gives in and gets pregnant anyway. And again, because this is fiction, we can assume that everything worked out for the best and they lived happily ever after. But in the real world, if the answer to should we have kids isn't an enthusiastic yes, then it shouldn't happen. Children aren't playthings, they're human beings, and their well-being should not be gambled with. We also have the characters of Robin and Barney from How I Met Your Mother, who are both made explicitly child-free, only to then end the show with Barney having a daughter and Robin ending up with Ted, a man who already has 2 children. The Big Bang Theory also gave us 2 child-free characters in Bernadette and Penny, and yet Bernadette goes on to marry man-child Howard and have 2 children with him. What's worse, she later goes on to shame Penny for not wanting kids when she confides in her. And sure enough, Penny goes on to end the series pregnant, apparently after coming home drunk one night and sleeping with Leonard, which is sketchy to say the least, as it implies Leonard, who did still want kids, could have taken advantage of his intoxicated wife and gotten her pregnant without her consent. Even if that wasn't his intention, sleeping with a drunk woman while you're sober is still messed up. I don't care if she's your wife or not. And those are just the sitcom examples. We also have people like Katniss Everdeen from The Hunger Games, yet another woman who changes her mind on having kids because her partner wanted them. And then there's Detective Rawlins from Law & Order SVU, who made a throwaway comment in one episode about never wanting kids, only to then go on to have multiple children in later seasons. So why does this matter? Well, 1 or 2 instances of this happening across media would be annoying, but largely harmless. But when we see it as frequently as we do, all it does is build up this idea of child-free people as immature, stunted, or traumatized individuals who will change their minds as soon as they mature or heal, which is not the case. Most child-free people have put a lot of thought into their decision not to become parents, and have made a responsible choice based on what's best for them. This trope also perpetuates the idea that having kids isn't really a choice at all, but an obligation or inevitability. I've heard some child-free people say that they didn't even realize they had the option to be child-free until they got older, because so many people treat parenthood as something that just happens to them, rather than something they chose against alternatives. And just to be clear, if you are someone who has or wants children, I take no issue with that. I will support you in your decisions, because I believe that people who are secure in their own life choices don't feel the need to push them onto others. I also don't have a problem with fictional characters having kids. The child-free community might be growing, but we are still the minority, and I would expect that to be reflected in our media. But I also feel it would go a long way to destigmatizing the decision not to have children if we had more positive examples of child-free people in the content we consume, and in particular child-free women, who have largely been portrayed as bitter old crones, workaholics, or cold and distant over the years. So my plea to all the present and future writers out there is to please be aware of the negative stereotypes surrounding the child-free and actively work to avoid them. If you want your characters to have children in the end, then please make sure that they want that from the beginning, and do consider writing more child-free characters into your work, because a happy ending is going to look different for everyone. Now, because I want to end this video on a positive note, I thought it would be a good idea to list some good examples of child-free people I've seen in media. I already mentioned Rosa and Captain Holt, but a few others include people like Dr. Christina Yang from Grey's Anatomy, who, despite accidentally getting pregnant twice, didn't waver on her stance and terminated. once naturally and once by intervention. Sex and the City also had two very prominent child-free characters in Carrie and Samantha, who are never framed in a way that implies that they're lesser or more unhappy than their parent friends. There's also Dr. Alan Grant from the Jurassic Park franchise, who would have fallen into the changed his mind category if it weren't for the third movie, which revealed that he and Dr. Stabler had split and he was still very much child-free. As much as I liked him and Ellie together, I am really grateful for whichever writer made this call. I also want to give an extra special shout out to my personal favorite child-free character, that being Madame Adelaide Bonfamille from The Aristocats. She could have been the perfect setup for the sad old crazy cat lady, but she's never once portrayed in a negative light. She's lived a long and happy life doing what she loves, and now she's settled into retirement with her beloved pets. I also get the sense that even though there may be a spark there between her and George, she is perfectly happy living the single life. I don't just love this woman, I want to be her someday. And on that note, I'm going to wrap up this video. Feel free to tell me who your favorite child-free characters are in the comments, as well as share about any you might be writing yourself. Stay brilliant, everybody. I'll see you in the next one.